Have you ever noticed something really strange happening just before something wonderful arrives or lands in your life? Perhaps you suddenly become exhausted for no reason. People start disappearing from your life. You fall out with someone. You feel anxious even though everything had been going well up until then. Or perhaps you've reached the point where you genuinely stop caring whether your manifestation happened or not. And then suddenly everything changed. Well, most people completely misinterpret these experiences because they assume that they're going backwards. They think manifestation isn't working. They convince themselves that they've done something wrong. But what if those experiences aren't signs of failure at all? What if they're actually evidence that your nervous system, your subconscious mind, and identity are reorganizing to receive the very thing you've been asking for, your desired outcome? A few years ago, I was convinced one of my manifestations had failed. Everything was falling apart. People were leaving my life. I fell out with a good friend. I was constantly feeling anxious. And then I felt exhausted. Nothing seemed to be working out for me. Doors were shutting. Cancellations were constant. Looking back now, I realized every single one of those experiences was actually pointing in the same direction. They weren't signs of failing at all. They were signs of change. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. After years of researching manifestation and studying thousands of experiences, I've discovered something really fascinating. People tend to experience the same patterns over and over again when they're manifesting. Not because the universe is randomly sending signs, but because your mind, body, and reality begin communicating as you move closer towards your ideal future. So in today's video, I'm going to share 10 signs that often appear just before a manifestation arrives. These aren't random. They're evidence that you're becoming the version of yourself who can naturally receive what you've been asking for, what you're capable of holding. So let's begin. Sign number 1, anxiety suddenly appears. Most people experience some kind of feelings of anxiety when they're manifesting because this is your nervous system asking, are you sure it's safe? Think about it this way. If you've spent 20 or 30 years believing that money is difficult to earn, relationships never last, success comes at a price like, criticism or simply just responsibility, or this old chestnut, that manifestation is absolute nonsense, those beliefs don't simply disappear overnight because you've written a few affirmations in your journal. Your subconscious has spent decades trying to keep you safe by keeping you in familiarity. When you suddenly ask for something completely different, a different future, your nervous system doesn't immediately celebrate. It checks whether that future feels safe. And if it doesn't, you will often experience anxiety, uncertainty, or even the urge to abandon your goal altogether. And it's not because your manifestation is moving away from you or the universe says no to you. It's because your nervous system is trying to catch up with where your conscious mind has already decided to go. Now, here's the interesting part. Most people think anxiety means that they should stop. They should stop visualizing. They should stop journaling. They should stop asking for more or taking action. They assume that they've fallen out of alignment. But what if anxiety isn't telling you to stop at all? What if it's simply telling you that your nervous system has reached the edge of what currently feels familiar? And that's it. That's a very different conversation because instead of trying to get rid of the anxiety, you begin asking, what part of my future doesn't yet feel safe for my nervous system to accept? That question alone can completely transform the way you move through manifestation. Sign number 2, people begin leaving your life. And honestly, this sign can feel really, really tough at times. But it's not punishment. It's preparation. This is one of the hardest signs to trust because we naturally want to hold on to people we've known for years, who we're familiar with. But every relationship is built on a version of who you were when that relationship began. So as you evolve, not every relationship evolves with you. Sometimes people leave because you've changed. Sometimes you leave because you've changed. Neither person is correct or right or wrong. You're simply no longer resonating at the same place in life. Although it can feel lonely for a while, it also creates space for new people who reflect the person you're becoming rather than the person you've been. I hope that makes you feel a little bit better. Sign number 3, you've suddenly been feeling exhausted for no apparent reason. And I often describe this as psychological weightlifting. If you've spent an hour lifting heavy weights in the gym, you wouldn't expect your muscles to feel exactly the same afterwards. They need time to repair and become stronger. And your subconscious works in very much the same way. Every time you release an old belief, challenge an old identity, or emotionally process something you've been carrying for years, your brain and nervous system are literally reorganizing themselves. And that's hard work. So instead of asking, why am I so tired all the time? Perhaps instead ask, what part of me is changing that requires this much energy? Sign number 4, you feel excited for absolutely no reason. Have you ever woken up feeling amazing, yet nothing in your external world that you're aware of has changed? No promotion, no good news, no positive text, nothing. Yet somehow you just know you've got this feeling that something good is happening or coming. This is one of my favorite signs. Your conscious mind hasn't yet caught up, but your subconscious has already begun accepting your new reality at a deeper level. This usually happens because your subconscious has accepted something before your conscious mind has had any evidence within your 3D reality. Your logical mind is still looking at your bank balance, still looking at your circumstances, still saying nothing's changed. But somewhere much, much deeper, your subconscious already knows a shift has taken place. And that's why the excitement often arrives before the evidence. So try not to overanalyze it or overthink it, just enjoy it and see it as evidence that manifestation is coming your way. Number 5, you suddenly want to learn something new. This is where people think they've become obsessed with self-development, maybe stocking up on loads of books, constantly listening to podcasts, downloading lots of courses, trying variations of manifestation techniques. Nutrition becomes a priority. You feel an urge to start exercising. Creativity starts to flow in various ways. You feel an innate desire towards learning new healing modalities. In essence, you suddenly feel drawn towards becoming a different person. That's because manifestation isn't asking you to become someone else. It's revealing who you've always been underneath all the conditioning. Growth becomes natural, not forced. And yes, absolutely, on the surface, constant learning can also be a sign of procrastination, but only if they're putting something they need to do off. But oftentimes it's preparation, because the future version of you naturally knows things the current version doesn't yet understand. So your curiosity isn't distracting you, it's preparing you. I tend to call it an upgrade. You're being upgraded. Sign number 6, synchronicities start multiplying. What's fascinating about synchronicities is that they rarely arrive alone. You don't usually experience only one single coincidence, you experience several. You hear the same phrase from different people perhaps. You repeatedly notice the same symbol. You think about someone and then all of a sudden they call within a moment. You open up a book to exactly the page you needed, or maybe that page gives you a specific message that really resonated with you or represents your desired outcome in some way. Individually, they're easy to dismiss. Collectively, they form a pattern. One of the principles I teach is this: 1 sign is interesting. 2 signs gets your attention. 3 signs or more signifies there is a pattern. It's the pattern that matters because patterns build belief. The mistake most people make is that they're looking for one spectacular sign on a silver platter illuminated by fireworks. But manifestation rarely works like that. Signs are rarely spectacular. No, signs are generally subtle, which is why most overlook them. You could consider it to be a bit like collecting evidence for a courtroom. One piece of evidence doesn't prove very much at all, but 20 pieces, all pointing in the same direction, become impossible to ignore. That's why I always tell people, don't just count the signs, which I call counting divine blessings. It's just as important to begin to recognize the patterns those signs are creating. Number 7, you start speaking differently. Now, this one really fascinates me. Listen carefully to your language. A few weeks ago, you might have said something like, I hope this works. Now, you might hear yourself saying, I know it's coming. You might even make statements like, it's already mine, because you stop speaking from fear. You stop speaking from lack. Your language then changes. This is a clear indication your identity is changing. Language is one of the clearest windows into your subconscious belief system. Your words reveal what your nervous system and subconscious has finally accepted. And it's a really, really profound shift. Sign number 8, opportunities suddenly appear. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is rejecting opportunities because they don't think it's going to move them towards their finished manifestation, their goal. Or maybe they are held back from fear. Perhaps you're trying to build a business, but all that keeps appearing is somebody asking you for a cup of coffee and you kind of feel like it's a waste of time. Or possibly someone introduces you to another person and you really don't think it's going to help. Or you've been invited to speak somewhere what you class as small. None of these things might look like success, but they may just be that bridge that leads you to it. Manifestation rarely arrives fully assembled. They often unfold through connected events. That's why I've learned never to underestimate a conversation, a phone call, a chance meeting. Looking back at my own life, some of the biggest breakthroughs didn't arrive looking like breakthroughs. They arrived in a conversation, a breakdown, a recommendation, a chance meeting, a phone call that I might not have even answered. At the time, they looked insignificant. Only afterwards did I realize they were the bridge to something much bigger. That's why I've learned not to judge opportunities by how impressive they may look on the surface. I judge them by how aligned they make me feel. Sign number 9, you stop caring. People often misunderstand this stage because they think they've lost their desired outcome. You haven't. You've simply released old attachment. There's a huge difference. Attachment says, I need this thing to happen before it can make me happy. Alignment says, I'll be delighted when or if it happens, but I'm not bothered either way. That's an incredibly powerful shift because your nervous system is no longer operating from lack. You're no longer chasing, you're allowing, two completely different and opposite energies. And finally, sign number 10, the drop down. This is probably my favorite sign of all. I call it the drop down. It's difficult to explain unless you've experienced it. Everything seems to settle. The chasing disappears, the anxiety dissolves, you stop needing more signs, you stop asking when or if it's happening, if it's going to work for you. You don't feel excited, you don't feel desperate, you simply know. And it's a strangely deep and profound feeling. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say it can feel a little disconcerting. It's almost like a, whoa, what's going on here? Neville Goddard describes this as living in the wish fulfilled. I describe it slightly differently. I believe it's the moment your nervous system finally catches up with the future reality you've been creating and is completely aligned. Your body now feels safe holding that reality. You're no longer trying to manifest it. You've become it. You've become the person who naturally expects it, to hold it, to receive it. And that's a completely different frequency to wanting. People often ask me, how do I know when I've reached the drop down? The answer is surprisingly simple. You stop looking, you stop checking, you stop needing reassurance. It's almost as though you've emotionally arrived before you've physically arrived. Does that make sense? Looking from the outside, nothing has changed, and yet everything inside has. It's an incredible feeling of blissful calm. I would also add, it feels like you're deeply connected or entangled with your desired outcome, almost as though you can predict it because you know you already have it. It is, in fact, a very strange feeling indeed, like as if you have an invisible connection with the outcome. That's when manifestation becomes effortless because you're no longer trying to convince yourself. Your body already believes. You know. Perhaps the biggest discovery I've made over years of researching manifestation is that the signs themselves aren't actually the goal. The goal is belief. Belief happens because you've collected enough evidence that your subconscious can no longer argue with your desired future. Every sign you notice is another piece of the puzzle or evidence. Evidence that your identity is changing. Evidence that your nervous system is adapting. Evidence that your subconscious is accepting a future it once believed was impossible. And eventually, you reach a point where you no longer need the signs because you've collected enough evidence. Belief has become certainty. That's when manifestation stops feeling like something you're trying to create and starts feeling like something that's simply unfolding as already yours. Because essentially you've become the person who naturally expects that future reality to happen without question. And perhaps that's what manifestation has always been about. Not changing the world around you first, but allowing the world within you to change so profoundly that your external reality has no choice but to follow. Thanks for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing, which helps my videos reach and help more people. If you'd like to learn how to map manifestation through my unique 8-stage mapping manifestation framework, go to my website, www.melindamulcahy.com, and book your place on my free live 45-minute workshop.